Be working with the pad again. Atlas is a little bit worried with the pad being up on the top of the fence. So my goal is to kind of get him used to having it next to him, but I want him to like line up next to it and not be super tight about it. And it's a little bit harder to see from this angle because he's angling like his hindquarters away. So he's got his shoulders kind of close, but his hips are definitely away from it. And he's just kind of standing away, so he's like, I don't really want to stand straight and parallel to it. So right now, I'm just going to start with what behavior I can get right now. So just kind of with his head and neck next to it, I'm just reinforcing so that he gets used to having that pad there and just can kind of have some positive association with it. Then I'll ask him to take a step forward. Same thing. I'm just going to feed him here and just let him hang out next to it. So I've had him touch and target it quite a bit, so he does want to touch it with his nose. So I'm just going to show him that I want him to line up instead, so you could see a little bit better here what I'm talking about, where his hips are really off to the inside. Right now, I'm not going to worry about that too much. And I'm going to use my hand as a target here so that he's not so inclined to turn and touch it, because that's not the behavior that I want right now. I want him to stay straight and stand next to it. He also does know the sideways toward, so I want him to line up here, but I want to get him just kind of used to it. He just looks a little bit more tight. His head and neck's raised up a little bit, so he kind of offered the sideways toward on his own. My cue is just like one arm like raised in the air, like right here, but he did offer it on his own, so that was actually quite nice. I think it was just him thinking that that was the behavior that I wanted, because I had grabbed onto the pad, but I like that he was thinking in the correct direction. But here he's kind of hesitant to even bring that like left shoulder next to it. His head and neck's very obviously much higher than normal because you can see like his ears are above the fence. He's not a big horse, he's technically a pony. So him having that raised neck, just tense body, kind of like how he's standing too, you can tell, kind of splayed out feet, kind of in the front feet and the hind feet, you can tell. So I'm just going to get him next to it here. Again, you can really see that his hips are to the inside. Right now, again, not a big deal. I just want to get him close to it and then pair positive things with being next to that pad. It also helps that it's not a super windy day when I film this, so the pad's not moving around, and just get him kind of used to that and just one step at a time. Like, just kind of have him go forward. If he comes up one step and I click, and in between the time that I've clicked and fed, he's taken a step back, that's okay. I'm going to feed it anyway. I can just bring my hand forward so he comes back into that position, but since I've clicked, I need to feed it. So, because he did just do that a little bit, but that does happen frequently in training as well. You can just kind of lure them forward with the food and feed them where you want them to be. But you can tell kind of how he's taking the food too. He's taking it kind of quickly, that he's just not super comfortable with it. You can see he moves his lips more. Usually he's pretty gentle with it, and he just kind of slowly takes it from my hand. So that's another tell here that he's a little bit more worried about this. So I'm going to ask for a little bit more. I probably should have definitely, well, not probably, I definitely should have gone slower than this. I was kind of thinking like, oh, well, you've had the pad on your back. Like, what's the difference? It's not a big deal. Um, and I should have just stayed with, having the pad by his head, having it by his neck, having it by his shoulder, very slowly going down on both sides, instead of like, oh, well, just come, like, put your belly and your hips next to it when he was not ready for that. So that's something I'm definitely working on, is not just like, okay, well, I think you're fine with it. He's telling me clearly with his body language that he's not fine with it. So I gotta kind of just honor that and kind of work through it slowly, because there's no good things come from rushing. Um, because if I rush it and he's worried about it, then we're just gonna backslide, and that's definitely not something that I want. So this looks better on this side. I like how he's a little bit more parallel. He's kind of stepping forward a little bit on his own. So these are all good signs. For some reason, he's just a little bit tighter on that left side. It might have been because we were working on that one a little bit more, and maybe I just pushed a little too much. Maybe it actually probably was from when I was putting the pad on, he got scared because I did do that on his left side, and it, like when he ran and it fell off. So that's possibly where that came from. So that is interesting to watch back and see. I think there's just a bug attacking me. I'm gonna ask him for another step. I like that. He's willing to go forward. He looks a little bit more relaxed, still with that raised head and neck, but willing to go forward, versus the other side, he didn't seem as willing to go forward. So I'm just gonna have him stand close to it and get used to it, because I do want him to like come up to the fence, have the pad up there, have the saddle up there, have whatever rain jacket, I want to mount from there and just have that skill. It's just something that I want to check off. It's probably not super necessary for riding, but I want that to be an option. Like when I'm riding him, if I need to grab something off the fence, I just want that to be solid, because there would be a possibility that something could be on the fence or I left something up there and I just don't want it to be a thing later on. So I just want to deal with it now. So now I'm going to ask him to line up the other way, and we're just going to work with just the pad like we have been, where I'm just kind of tossing it over his back. So I'm just going to line up. See with no pad how willing he is to just come right over, versus if you ride it a little bit, when the pad's up there, he's like, and he kind of steps over and he kind of stops. So it's just him telling me he's not super comfortable with that. So now we've gotten to the point where we've added up enough time with the pad on his back that I can throw it on, and then I can feed him. So he's made it up to, like, I think we're at 12-ish seconds in the last session, so that's plenty of time for the pad to be on and for me to grab him and give him his treat, and him not get all worried and it's been on there too long. So this is really great. So I'm just putting it on and then pulling it off. That looks great. I pulled it off and he's just like putting his head on the ground. That looks awesome. I should have brought my cone again. I need to be consistent with my training here. But I'm happy that he is to this point. It seems like a little thing, but it's a big deal for Atlas. If you've seen all the rest of his videos where he was afraid of the pad and kind of had a bad experience with it, and he is a sensitive guy, so this is a big deal for him. And just kind of tossing it on and doing all that stuff, this is fantastic. Now I brought my cone and I'm gonna have him walk forward. So I don't know if he's quite ready for that. I would have him definitely increase that amount of time, because again, I'm kind of making a big time jump, so like from like that 12 seconds, maybe a little bit longer, so I've got to be careful. I'd say I'd like a good 20 seconds. At that point, they're pretty comfortable with the pad and it's not a big deal. Some horses are going to be much faster for sure. I would say that 20 seconds with the pad on, specifically for Atlas, is where I would like him to, before he starts moving forward with the pad. So, but he did that well. I just got to be careful. I just don't want to do too much and scare him again, since we kind of had to work through that, and since he had regressed a little bit. So I just want to be careful with that. So same thing on this side. I did bring out my cone halfway through the lesson, but you know, I did it. So pad on, and then I can feed him. Perfect. And then I'm just taking it off, letting it fall. That looks great. Kind of touches his foot a little bit. He's touching the cone. Oh, and then he's like, same reaction he had to that bear, where he kind of just backs up. He's like, nah, I don't really want that on there. Not a huge reaction, but I gotta pay attention to it. And notice that he's not super comfortable with that. I should have reinforced that though. When the pad touched his foot, I should have clicked and moved the pad before he had that opportunity to move. So I'm pulling it through instead, so it's not too many things. Like, I should also just do one thing at a time. So pulling that pad down on the outside of the round pen lets us work on just pulling the pad off versus pulling the pad off and having it touch his foot. We can work on that a little bit later. And then just taking maybe a half a step forward. That's not too bad. So that looks much better. We're definitely making progress. Slow progress, but we're getting there.